God's will is simple. The most wretched man in hell will not be Adolf Hitler. The most wretched man in hell, or woman, will not be one like Joe Stalin or some of these more modern devils. The most wretched person in hell will be a former Seventh-day Adventist.
Hello and welcome to another SDA Q&A, and we're going to have a fantastic conversation today. I'm joined by Ray Doherty and Stephen Beagles. How are you guys going? Good to see you.
Doing good.
Hey,
Doing good.
Stephen, can you just adjust your camera down a bit? Your head's a little bit too at the bottom. There we go. Perfect.
That better?
And welcome to our very big audience watching today. I think we've attracted a little bit of attention with our thumbnail. And today, I think David has joined us. Awesome. David Thiel, we are live. How are you? We are live, David. Hopefully you can hear. Hi, Julian.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Awesome. We were just thinking you may not be joining us. That's great to have you here. Perfect timing. And I'll get you just to tilt your camera a little bit so we can see you a little bit better.
Yes.
You can hear me all right?
I'm hearing you. There we are. How's that?
Perfect. And if you can just tilt your camera down a little bit so your head's... Same with you, Stephen. It's fallen back again. That's good.
Oh.
And David, just down a little bit so your head's a bit in the screen.
I can't see myself, so...
Okay, so just tilt it so it's just down a bit. So your head... There we go. Oh, no, it's dropped again. This is the joys of going live, everybody.
Yeah.
Now, David, I think you've got your name spelt wrong on the...
Yes, I hit a key.
It's okay if you get it wrong. Not good when I do. I've done that sometimes. That's good, Stephen. Very good.
Okay.
I would love to correct it, but I don't know how.
Let me see if I can. I think I've got a button here. Did that change it?
Yes, that's got it.
Oh, good. Right, here we are. Welcome, everybody, and we're going to have a fantastic conversation today. Welcome, big audience. Good to have you all watching. Perfect timing, David. I was just about to say the thumbnail has caused quite a bit of interest. I've called gospel Adventists, all playfully and with tongue-in-cheek, the honey trap of the SDA church. Now, David, are you still with us? David's screen has frozen. We'll keep moving ahead in faith. We'll step out in faith that David's camera will come good. I'm glad everyone's watching. Please share your comments and whatnot. So just to start with, though, there we go, David. You're back, I think.
I am.
Back and unfrozen. You only live down the road from me, and Ray lives on the other side of the world, and he was having some problems too. And I thought it was because of the distance, but no. Okay, let's get started. As I said, the thumbnail has caused some consternation with viewers, but a lot of interest. That's why we have a lot of people watching right now. Gospel Adventism, the honey trap of the SDA church. I do say that playfully, but I also think, as you all know, that the Gospel Adventist movement within a movement, I just feel could be a little bit more organized, networked and coordinated. And it's great to have people like Stephen Beagles, who is doing just that. He has websites and YouTube channels and I think blogs going on. And it's great to see that he is so boldly sharing his take on Gospel Adventism. David Thiel, I've known for many years. Dr. David Thiel, administrator, teacher, scholar, former Adventist pastor, and great to have you here with us, David, as well. Now,
don't call me an administrator, Peter. I mean,
well, you've been, when I first met you, you were in an administrative role. You've had many hats over the years, and we've got Ray up the. This is a bit like the Brady Bunch over this side, and Ray Doherty is an attorney, lawyer. We call them in Australia a former Adventist, and as I said, Stephen Beagles down the bottom there. So I'm going to get you just all give a quick 1 minute take on who you are, and then I've got a intro I want to read out so I don't get sidetracked. And the plan today is to really set forward some of my theories first, find out where Stephen and David are aligned in their Gospel Adventist, Progressive Adventist view. Ray's going to sit back a bit. I've got a couple of questions which I'll then follow up, and then we'll just open up to a broader discussion. But just quickly, we'll go around in a circle, starting with Stephen Beagles. Tell us a little bit about yourself. You've got 1 minute. Just quick nutshell version of who you are.
Well, I grew up in the Seventh-day Adventist church, and my grandparents were missionaries. My mom's father was a missionary in Africa. My mom was born in South Africa, and my grandfather was the treasurer for the Review and Herald for 20 years. That's on my father's side. And I'm a fourth generation Seventh-day Adventist. I grew up in the school system, anywhere from a one-room schoolroom all the way up to academy, and then I did a year of college at Columbia Union College in 1991. And I've been on the East Coast, on the West Coast, up north and down south. And I pretty much got a full picture of Adventism from the inside out. And I also am very familiar with a lot of my friends who are former Adventists, and they keep me informed about what they're thinking, and so I know pretty much both sides of the story.
Yeah, great. Ray Doherty, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I was born and raised in the Adventist church. I didn't leave officially until about February of 2025, but I was, again, raised in it. I grew up in Adventist churches, going to Adventist schools, homeschooled for a time, went to an Adventist college, stayed in the Adventist church, again, until recently. But when I sometimes tell people, a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but also a little bit seriously, that I left the Adventist church after I became a Christian. And that's no comment about Mr. Beagles or Dr. Thiel or any individual per se. It's just that for me, the kind of Adventism, the kind of, I should say, teaching that I was raised with, I found biblically wanting. I'll put it that way. And can I just quash one just awful heresy I'm seeing in the chat? Haystacks are still awesome.
I saw that too. I was very disappointed, you guys. Haystacks are awesome.
Stephen,
you.
as the Bishop of Gospel Adventism, can you excommunicate? No.
Yes. Thank you, Ray. Good to have you on the show. And David Thiel, tell us a little bit about yourself. You've got a minute.
Can I just ask Ray a question first?
Sure.
Sure.
Geographically, where did you grow up?
Oh, sure. I grew up in the upper Midwest, Michigan, Minnesota.
Okay. Okay.
I went to Union College in Lincoln, Nebraska. That's actually where I live now, is Lincoln, Nebraska.
Yep.
Spent some time in Idaho and Colorado. So just the interior primarily.
Fine. Thank you.
Mhm.
My parents became Adventists when I was 5, 6, something like that. So I've basically grown up in the church. My schooling is largely non-Adventist. My doctorate is from a non-Adventist institution. I've worked as a pastor and a theology lecturer, and am still an ordained Adventist, preaching pretty much every Sabbath. My wife's family has deeper roots in Adventism than mine. She's a direct descendant of the first Adventist convert in Australia. But my Adventist roots don't go back that far at all.
You're a newbie. Right. Well, I'm going to just read out something I prepared a little earlier, because just, keep me on track, and then we'll open it up to share a little bit more of people's individual views and their take on what I read. So let me just get that ready. As we've said, I've already introduced everybody. Joined today by two notable voices in the Adventist landscape: Stephen Beagles, a prominent voice and self-proclaimed Bishop of Gospel Adventism, and Dr. David Thiel, a retired SDA pastor, administrator, and scholar who historically stood as a great supporter of Dr. Desmond Ford. I'm not speaking out of school here. David's been on the show many times and has shared those views. So, he's been a great supporter of Dr. Desmond Ford during the pivotal theological reckonings of the church's past, as well as Ray Doherty, a former Adventist, regular guest, and attorney/lawyer. So thank you guys for being here today. I want to state my thesis clearly right from the beginning, because it directly challenges the space that you both occupy, Stephen and David. My premise is that Gospel Adventism operates as a structural honey trap for seekers and young people. You champion a beautiful, compelling vision, a Jesus-first, Bible-first gospel, and people are drawn into the church by this grace-centered approach. However, new believers quickly discover that the institutional core of traditional Adventism, the unique sanctuary doctrine, the investigative judgment, and the authoritative inspiration of Ellen G. White, frequently stands in direct opposition to that very gospel. In fact, traditional SDA leadership has long argued that a pure gospel Adventism actually unravels the entire fabric of the unique Adventist identity. Furthermore, while the church often claims to accommodate a broad spectrum of personal beliefs, that tolerance seems to vanish the moment those beliefs are voiced out loud. If you are an employee of the church, your freedom of speech is strictly limited. History shows that breaking ranks publicly leads directly to ostracism, institutional cancellation, and the loss of your livelihood even. By criticizing these core dogmas while simultaneously lending your credibility and support to the overall church body, are you inadvertently serving as a marketing front, a honey trap for an institution that would silence you if you spoke these truths from a standard Adventist pulpit? Let's unpack a little bit. how you navigate this friction. Stephen Beagles first.
Well, Peter, thanks for asking. To start out, I want to say I'm a firm believer in the 28 fundamental beliefs of the Seventh-day Adventist Church as they're interpreted through the lens of righteousness by faith. And I believe that to be the most authentic and the purest expression of Seventh-day Adventist philosophy, doctrine, beliefs that we have. And I do believe that Ellen White and the original pioneers would accept the message that we have today in terms of righteousness by faith. I think there's been a lot of misinterpretation of church doctrine. There's been a lot of controversy. There's been a lot of debate over the years. And I believe the church is finally starting to settle in the middle where it belongs. We're not antinomianism. Okay, we do believe in the Ten Commandments, but we're not extreme legalists where we believe that keeping those commandments are what save you. The only thing that saves you is Jesus Christ and Him crucified. And by simple faith and trust in Him, you're assured salvation right up front. That's justification. We're declared righteous right up front. And so, no, I don't think that this is a false hope. I think this is the real hope of Scripture. And anyone that is true to Scripture and really interprets the spirit of prophecy in the way that is supposed to be read will come to the same conclusion.
Thanks, Stephen. Now, Ray, I thought instead of building up a bunch of questions that you answer later, it might be easier if you comment as we go, or would you rather just build up some thoughts that we bring in later? I know that's a last-minute adjustment.
Well, that's fine. I'm curious, when you say righteousness by faith, could you just expand on that a little bit? Because every person, practically speaking, that I've ever talked to within Adventism that uses that phrase means something a bit different.
So, Stephen, and then we'll go to David to answer that question and to reflect on what you've just said too there.
Yes, righteousness by faith is when we're declared righteous by simple faith and trust in Jesus Christ. That's justification. And so we have assurance of salvation based on our status. Okay. Now, there is an internal righteousness that comes after you've accepted the fact that you're saved. You have assurance of salvation. And out of love and gratitude, you're full of the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit will begin to make changes in your life that will draw you closer to Christ and closer to God's will for your life. And that's sanctification, but it's a lifelong process. And so some people are immature Christians, some people are more mature Christians, but our salvation is not dependent on where we are on the spectrum of sanctification. It's completely rooted in our being declared righteous by faith up front. And that's how we make it to the judgment, by being declared righteous.
We'll come back to you, Ray, on that one. I'm sure you've got some things to say there, but I'm interested in what David thinks about that, as well as my intro, where I'm suggesting that the gospel Adventists are perhaps unraveling Adventism, but they provide a Jesus-focused gospel that brings people in and encourages young people to stay. But when those people actually investigate Adventism, they stumble into the great controversy and some of the more legalistic core teachings of Adventism. What are your thoughts on that intro that I gave and what Ray just asked?
Yeah. I'm interested in the contradiction that's there. That you're suggesting that we are part of the advertising process, the bait of Adventism, and we're bringing people in and growing the church. And yet simultaneously, the church is persecuting us and trying to get rid of us. That seems a very odd thing for the church to be doing if our function is to bring people into the world, in from the world. That doesn't track for me.
I'm not saying you successfully are bringing people in. I'm saying that when people come in because of the honey trap, it is just one aspect of that kind of evangelism. They soon discover that it's not really there. I don't think the church uses you as a marketing ploy, but I have observed that I stayed myself till I was 54, and I've observed people joining the church and young people staying because they value and love the gospel Adventist message. The reason the church does, as you just said, try to eliminate the gospel Adventist message is because it doesn't actually dovetail with the traditional, with the mainstream view of Adventism. So I would counter what you're saying there based on that.
Can I jump in?
I
would say that there's always been a split. In 1888, there was a split between the legalist wing and the gospel wing. And that split has never gone away, and it's always been there. Those two sides have been butting heads ever since. And sometimes the gospel Adventists pull ahead, sometimes the legalists pull ahead. It's like a pendulum swing. And to me, the only solution to this is that the church has to stop being so lenient on legalism, because what that is doing is it's driving people into confusion. They need to make clear what we do believe is we believe in justification by faith alone in Christ, and that we don't keep the law in order to be saved. We keep the law because we're saved out of loving gratitude. But the only way to make it through judgment is to be declared righteous by faith in Christ. That's the only way. And in my own experience, it was gospel Adventism that kept me in the church. You know, I started out on the more legalist side, thinking I had to keep Sabbath and be a vegetarian in order to be saved. And that drove me to depression and desperation. I wanted to leave. But then I started reading the gospel literature that's in the church, that's being published by the church. Morris Venden, you know, and there's a host of books you can read that are clearly gospel oriented. And that's what kept me on the right track within the church.
It kept me in the church too, Stephen. Now, David, you were right there, ground zero with the Des Ford thing. You've said this publicly, so again, I'm not selling out of school, but just take us back to that moment, because I guess my theory is that time period, the Des Ford post-Glacier view, where perhaps if we were having a conversation back then, you would maybe agree with me a bit more than you do now. Tell me, we ran into each other at Bunnings, which is like a Home Depot kind of store over here. And we were chatting about the early days of season 2, where I was interviewing many of the people and the players that were at Glacier View, were deeply and closely connected to it. You said something to me that really stuck in my mind. Do you remember about how you were talking about how it just impacted you so much? Take us back to Bunnings and that conversation, and then take us back to how you felt back in the Des Ford Glacier View. I call it a bit of a kangaroo court trial.
Yeah. I'm sure what you're alluding to is that I have said on occasions that Glacier View was the defining event of my life, more important to me than to my history than marriage, parenthood, ordination, a doctorate. And that is the state of affairs that continued essentially until we chatted on your Q&A. Because it was a means of catharsis. That is not the experience of everyone, either of those who left or those who remained. It is my particular experience.
Yeah.
And Yeah, I understand why people left at that time. And I even understand some of the places people went when they left. I have friends who are atheists and total unbelievers today, in the backwash of Glacier View, and I understand how they got there. Yeah, I'm not sure where you want to go with this
No,
in
I
terms
just
of
want to.
today's discussion.
I just want to establish that it was monumental to you, and what I found in my 86 conversations in season 2, that theme ran throughout everyone who had been in some way connected to Glacier View, Des Ford, the new theology. I guess why I want to go back there is to highlight that one of the things that I think you said in one of the interviews, and it's something that many of my guests who have remained Adventists have said, is they had to be very careful how they presented their version of this perhaps new theology that Des Ford had said when they were applying for jobs. You've mentioned you had to be very careful what you said. And I'm just setting this scene because my theory is that hasn't changed, where you still have to be careful. But I'm guessing that you and Stephen in some of our recent Facebook chat have said, no, we actually have a very diverse view. I would agree that there are many sheep in the pen that think differently. But when those sheep speak up, they're pushed to the edge of the pen or out of the pen altogether. So I want you just to go back to your early 80s, share with me your thoughts on how free you feel you were able to speak about being a little bit more aligned to Des Ford than perhaps you should have been.
I reject the suggestion that I was a disciple of Des.
I'm not saying you're a disciple of Des. I'm saying that you had to be careful thinking up and speaking anything that was a little bit outside. I know for a fact I was at Avondale, 200 ministers in Australia, 200 in America approximately. They often talk about when they were asked about their theological position. I'm not saying you're a disciple, but when you were asked and others were asked about their theological position, they all say they had to be super careful what they said to the brethren.
It was a hysterical time. There's no question about that. Bear in mind, I'm graduating college 2 months after Glacier View, 3 months after Glacier View. I'm going out as an intern, the last class in Australia taught by Des. You know, and yes, when it came to things like the sanctuary, I said what I said. How many times was I called into my to my president's office and asked, "What do you believe about the sanctuary? We've heard thus and such." The answer to that would be none. I was asked prior to getting employed, because, well, no, not because of the sanctuary per se. But in terms of what I actually believed on the sanctuary, I don't know that I was ever asked.
I guess I'm not speaking to specifics and individual, this did or didn't happen to me. You have to admit, and all people of your generation, like you were graduating in 80 from college, I was graduating from high school in 80.
Right.
there was a deep sense and agreement that you had to be careful how you spoke. Now, what I noticed, your generation went a little bit underground, shared tapes, joined secretly to GNU, got it sent to you in brown paper bags. My generation pretty much left, or those of us who stayed tried to somehow navigate a very difficult environment. One that you guys had camaraderie and kept saying to young people like me, hang in there, things are changing. Part of the reason for my frustration, any angst that you might feel, is that I see that kind of promise being offered to young people to this very day. And yet I see people like Christopher Mindanao sharing his view on, the seal of God gone from the church. He had to leave. I see Love Reality. I see the One Project. I see all of these kind of more progressive kind of Adventist movements. And when they speak up, they're shut down. I grew into adulthood in a landscape where we knew there was the college church, one end of the street, the memorial church, the other end of the street. We knew the two sides didn't get on that well, and we tried to find our way and navigate between it. We were given lots of hope from your generation, from the Des Ford guys, the cool hippie dudes that came up through the 70s, the music, but we were constantly being shut down if we stepped outside a certain framework. My suggestion is that the gospel Adventists have not accepted any accountability for that time period. They were progressive, they were secretive behind closed doors, they passed all the cassettes to each other. They acknowledged very clearly to me that they had to be very careful what they said publicly about their more progressive new theological views. Behind the scenes, they would say that. It was very clear that they had to step very carefully. But what I'm finding now is they're saying, oh, no, it's a diverse church, we can speak freely. And I'm going, that's not really very genuine thing to say, because no, you cannot speak as freely. You will literally get shut down. If you write any books speaking freely, they will be banned. You have plenty of situations that confirm my theory that speaking collectively and publicly about your theological views, as expressed by Stephen Beagles and you publicly many times. I love your sermons. I love you guys. I love what you present. I'm just saying that I think you're in denial if you think things have changed that much from Neil Wilson to Ted Wilson. And I'll let you say something in a second, but I just think that I've noticed in my 86 interviews of season 2, the Gospel Adventists supported me. Thank you so much for sharing all this stuff, Peter. Really appreciate it. I was holding the feet of every kind of Adventist to the fire. But when I started holding the feet of the good guys, the progressives, the Gospel Adventists, their feet to the fire, whoa, no accountability, instant pushback on me in very subtle, intelligent, nuanced ways. And so I'm sort of pushing back a bit with that. I'm saying, hang on, guys. You support me when I'm saying, hey, what a great movement. But as soon as I start saying you could do more, what did you do wrong? Oh, nothing. I'm hoping and cajoling for a little bit of accountability from you guys.
So what you would like us to have done more was to exercise power we didn't have. I mean, I was a young intern, fresh out of college. What exactly is my responsibility for what happened? You talk about accountability, but I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, I gave myself slack. I cut myself slack. I've recently made it very clear that I don't hold you guys accountable for back then. I hold you guys accountable for this wave now.
Okay.
I believe that now you can speak up more freely. You can get more organized. I am in no way judging the Des Fords, the theologians, the scholars, the academics of the 80s, the 90s, into the 2000s, through Jan Paulson era. I am saying that now, 46 years after Glacier View, you guys do need to stand up and make some sort of a change. You couldn't do it then, and I have zero judgment on you then, because I was the same. I went into the 90s the same kind of, needed to be careful what I said, toned down my music at certain places, did not speak about my disagreements with the theology. I'm not attacking or blaming you guys for then. I'm saying, guys, it's time now. What happens next is where the gospel Adventists will be remembered or not.
And I appreciate what you're saying. The church can do better in explaining the gospel, making it clear where we stand. And there does need to be a more vocal involvement from the membership, because the membership is really where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
The politics in the church is very delicate, and it's a balancing act. It's like walking a tightrope. It's not impossible, but you got to keep your balance. I've seen conservatives get banned. I've seen liberals get banned. It's not so much what they said, it's how they said it. If you're viewed as attacking the church and trying to make changes too fast, too quick, then they get nervous. But if you present this as a deeper understanding of what we already believe, and it's a positive thing that we want to solve some problems, then it's more acceptable. And I'm of the opinion we're not here to win the argument, we're here to win the heart. And that's the most important thing that you can do when you speak, is that you're not so much focusing on winning the argument, because you get people on the defensive. But if you win them over, personal friendship, personal contact, win their hearts, then the argument kind of takes care of itself. And so I have more than a lot of respect for the older gospel Adventists. They laid the framework for where we are at today. It's a layering process, and the politics go back and forth. It's like a ship on the ocean, but we have to hang on and just stay balanced, and don't let ourselves get pushed too far one way or too far the other direction.
What are your thoughts, David, on what I just said? And thanks, Stephen.
I am not sure. But again, I wonder exactly what it is that you're wanting us to do.
Have you watched my shows in the last 6 months?
Not very much, I must confess.
And that's not compulsory. I'm just wondering, because I have been very clear the last 6 months.
Yeah,
Can I just say something?
I am not all that interested in some of the things that some Adventists are very concerned with. I am not interested pretty much at all in what the General Conference says. It doesn't have anything to do with me. And if General Conference make a bad decision, and they have, I think objectively, if you weigh up what Des said from a conservative Adventist perspective, I'm coming here. If you weigh up what Des was saying on the sanctuary on one side, and put on the other side an outcome like former Adventist Fellowship and Life Assurance Ministries and Dale Ratzlaff and all of that stuff, which grows directly out of Glacier View. From a conservative point of view, we would have been better off absorbing Des and keeping him within the church and not
Mm.
provoking that sort of reaction on the other side, which is going to continue forever and ever and ever, and be a thorn in our flesh. So I think objectively, without discussing whether Des was right, wrong, or indifferent, strategically, the decisions made were terrible. So I don't have to say that every decision of the General Conference is perfect. My responsibility as someone who's no longer employed by the church because I retired is to preach the gospel when I have the opportunity and to maximize the opportunities I have to do that. Now, I don't know that I'm maximizing my opportunities to preach the gospel by facing off with administrators or church members that I think they're wrong here or there or somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
I heard Stephen before say that he accepts all 28 fundamentals read through the lens of righteousness by faith. I would say that I accept all 28 fundamentals at their theological core. I think we'd have a lot less trouble if we had 28 fundamental sentences instead of 28 fundamental paragraphs. I don't always agree with how they're expressed, but at their core, I'm an Adventist. So do I expect the church to be perfect? No, the gospel teaches me that God uses those who are imperfect. That's true of me. Why should I expect it to be different of the church?
So in answer to your question, what it is that I hope to see from you guys is I have been challenging you to do I'm speaking collectively, to do what you and Stephen are doing, but to get a little bit more organized and coordinated about it, because I don't believe in just going, oh, okay, happy Sabbath, haystacks, let's have our gospel in the corner that we can share. I see in the experience I've had with now 577 interviews, hundreds of hours, a kind of Adventism that is failing, holding itself back, hurting young people at a mental health level, and creating a two-tier system for women that can't be ordained, and because of their gender. And I see the guys and women, the people who have a chance to make a difference, and this is where I'm not speaking about you, David or Stephen. I often follow your sermons, David, and I love the interview we did on the age of the earth. I love this stuff. I am suggesting that to just say, well, I'm doing what I can in my part of the world as a progressive Adventist, or, hey, I'm just going to enjoy cultural Adventism for what it offers, fine. I'm suggesting that I feel like I have seen from finger on the pulse interviews 3 times a week, hours and hours for 6 years, some deep trouble coming relating to the mental health of young people and women in the Adventist church. So when you ask, what's your point? What are you doing? My point is to go, okay, traditional Adventists aren't going to change. Former Adventists have left. We're actually feeling a whole sense of relief in many ways from not having to deal with the quagmire of cray-cray. The leadership have their own kind of church thing going on. I see you guys, the progressive Adventists, as the last bastion of hope for providing a safe place within the Adventist church. And all I hear is, oh, I can be any kind of Adventist I want to be. I don't agree that that is the case. I think there's real danger, real trouble And I think unless there's more David Thiels and Stephen Beagles getting coordinated, the opportunity of creating a more Christ-centered, Jesus-focused, gospel-orientated version of Adventism is slipping away.
And
Now,
Peter,
David, I'll just quickly get David to comment on that, then you, Stephen, and then we're going to bring in Ray. So, David, just quickly, because it was your question I answered.
Yeah. And again, it has to be said that's a broad philosophical type of thing.
What's broad?
I'm
broad about saying gospel Adventists should get coordinated?
How? What do you mean?
Well, how does the traditional Adventist get coordinated? They start the Concerned Brethren. They get powerhouse leaders like the Standish Brothers. They run meetings. They send out publications. They have meetings. They have social media platforms. It's very, very clear that if you want to get behind a movement, there's ways to promote it, to market it, to create a safe place for young people. It's not a broad thing.
Yeah.
I'm saying create a movement.
Yeah.
Can I respond?
Yeah, please.
Peter, we're not trying to compete with the Seventh-day Adventist Church. We're trying to use the levers and mechanisms that we have at our disposal, at our level, to do what we can with what we have where we're at. And we can't do everything at once, and it's a growing process. It takes time. But we're not here to set up another organization. We're here to try to steer the organization that we have towards a more biblical, Christ-centered theology. Not that it's not already there, but we need to make it more clear on where we stand. We need to push back on the legalism and the last generation theology, and make sure that we know what Seventh-day Adventists stand for, is that Jesus Christ and Him crucified, righteousness by faith, everything else is important, but it's not primary. Now, when you mention women's ordination, if it had been up to the North American division, we would have passed that 2015. But you have a world with different ideas about women and about their place in society. And there was a lot of other votes that came in from outside of North America that pushed the pendulum back to not ordaining women. But had it been up to the North American division, I know Dan Jackson was a strong champion of it. There was a lot of leaders that were coming out and proclaiming, this is what we want to see happen. There were some people that were, there was a debate, but I think we had won the argument. But for whatever reason, the politics didn't play out in our favor. But we tried, and we're going to continue trying. Ellen White was a woman. She founded a denomination. She encouraged women ministers. She said, you don't need ordination to preach the gospel. Okay, you just preach it and let the Holy Spirit do the rest of it. But when it comes to the politics, that's a whole nother ball game. And it's very tricky when you're dealing with a world system, a global system, with different ideas all over the world.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I can see David's frustration. And it's like, well, what are you judging us for? I get all that, but my point is that I think there's a problem here that maybe you guys aren't aware of. I see people like Doug Batchelor, David Asherick, Ty Gibson, all of these guys, from the Concerned Brethren to the Heartland Institute that the Standish Brothers set up. When the traditional Adventist has a message they want to get out there, they have a fire in their belly and they get organized and they pull together stuff in every possible way, networked, monetized, leadership. And I just see the opportunity post Glacier View with Des Ford, Good News Unlimited. I see so many opportunities. That's why I'm not criticizing the last 46 years. But I now see a repeat of back then. And I don't see the fire in your belly. I've got more fire trying to push you guys to get organized than you guys have in yourself. And that's why it doesn't sound like it right now, but that's why I have pulled back from my having a go at you guys, because I do understand that I could be totally wrong and there's nothing to see here. But I just get a feeling like when traditional Adventists want to move, they move, and they're moving hard all the time. And I just lament that the vibrancy of what I witnessed as a young person in the late 70s and through the 80s, this vibrant gospel Adventist progressive underground movement, as it began to get coordinated and kind of peaked with Jan Paulson, when they booed him at that GC with the no vote, I expected there to be a rallying cry, So for the last 6 years, I've been saying, come on, guys, you've got something good. Let's do it. But all I'm faced with is, there's nothing to see here. We can be as diverse as we want. Oh, I can speak up. What are you doing, Peach? I just feel like, what's going on, David? Why is no one grasping that vision that I have, that for you guys?
Yeah. Well, Peter, one of the things that I would say is I objected before when you called me an administrator. One of the reasons I don't organize something is that I'm not an administrator. That is just in the...
But surely you can lament that there are no leaders or administrators getting behind the gospel Adventist movement. Can't you lament that? There's no leaders. I'm not a leader. Nothing's happening. Okay.
I do not know whether or not that is the case. Such is the degree of my disconnect from the sort of institutional structures of the church. I'd struggle to tell you who the local union president is. And the reason is I don't care. It just doesn't interest me. It might have once, but it certainly doesn't now. What we clearly should do is set up a podcast to rival yours.
Exactly.
And draw off your audience into a gospel Adventist podcast, Peter.
I'm trying to help you guys. I know that Stephen has, there's been times where Stephen has been disappointed that I have shifted a bit. I didn't think I had, but then I realized one day when he said something to me, Stephen, you were right. I have shifted. Before I was speaking positively of the gospel Adventist, trying to help the network. I was definitely, you look at season 2, I'm definitely holding their feet to the fire. My first interview with Bill Johnson, I asked him some questions that he couldn't even answer. Yeah. So I've been pushing these guys, definitely. But what the shift is that I've given up thinking you guys can actually do anything about it. Back then I had hope, not that I would do anything. And I've loved watching your stuff. You're probably the most coordinated gospel Adventist I know. So again, it's hard for me to sometimes have this conversation because I really like you and David, and David and I will catch up again at the local cafe and have a great talk. I really, it's true, David. I really value you as a friend. The frustration people see in me is because I see an opportunity. Look, if you guys organized a gospel Adventist movement within the church and it became established and gained a foothold and influence, I still would never join again. I am never going to be a gospel Adventist, an Adventist, a cultural Adventist, an Adventist leader. I'm well and truly gone. But I have established a podcast YouTube channel that talks a great deal about it, and it has become my vocation. And I guess I'm saying I'd love to help, but every time I try and help, you guys go, "Oh, stop attacking me," or oh, we're doing the best we can, or oh no, we're here. I just want. I guess there's a part of me, as laid back as I am, that loves to see action.
And that's a wonderful point. And the church can do better, and we should do better. And what we need to do is encourage the gospel evidence that we have to stay. And so when I see gospel evidence trying to find fellowship elsewhere, that hurts me, because I'm like, well, we can use you here. We need you here in the church. We need you to stand up and to speak your mind and to push back a little bit. Not to criticize leadership, not to criticize the church, but to help us to grow and understand things from a deeper level and a deeper perspective, and maybe help us solve some of the problems that we have. But we're not going to be doing it by attacking each other. And so it's not so much what we say, it's how we're saying it. And are we willing to talk? Are we willing to debate? Are we willing to have these hard discussions, and at the end of the day still be friends?
I think as individuals we can. I think collectively the gospel Adventist is very naive. Not you, not David. I just believe that collectively the gospel Adventist, like when I interviewed Rainer Bruinsma the other day in his new book about, I'll just quickly bring it onto the screen.
I'm sure he'll appreciate the plug.
Yes, I like plugging towards authentic Adventist theology, and I'm like, oh, I think that's a bit of an oxymoron. The Adventist theology, authentic. I don't know, but I just throw up my hands in the air when I interview, and again, I really like him, and I'm happy to plug his book, and I want to plug you guys as well. But there's a naivety to gospel Adventists that they really do think, you guys really do think that things can change, and that it's just a pendulum swing, and that really somewhere deep rooted in Adventism is a gospel Adventism. And I know you really believe that, but what confronted Des Ford, what confronts people today, it's not going to change. It's immovable. It's like trying to get soccer fans to turn the soccer game into a gridiron football game. It's just not that. There's a ball involved, there's a field involved, there's players involved, but the traditional pillars, doctrines, they are never going to have a dent made in them from gospel Adventists. It is never going to change. In 100 years from now, when people are watching this archived in some kind of virtual reality, watching glasses realm or whatever, that gospel Adventists, I'm sure, will still be on shows like this going, I think it's going to change. It's only 200 plus years, but I think it's going to change. There's this kind of hope that you guys have that's just incredible.
Well, there's a saying that says the mighty oak was once a crazy nut that stood its ground.
Yeah.
But I think you guys are a whole different kind of tree. Trying to be a mighty oak. You're not mighty oaks. You're some other really good tree.
This is where we disagree, is that you equate Adventism with last generation theology and legalism, and we equate Adventism with the biblical Christ-centered approach that we're talking about.
Yeah, but Ellen White has got Ellen White's got thousands of words that support last generation theology.
And we have thousands of words that support gospel Adventism.
Peter, one of the things that interested me, one of the churches I preach in, I was asked by the elder about a statement in Ellen White, and I went and did an exegesis of the chapter. It's in great controversy, where the statement is found. It's often trotted out for last generation. I did a careful exegesis of the chapter, just as I would do if I was looking at a text I had questions about in the Bible, and was amazed. I was genuinely amazed to find that Ellen White was not talking about last generation perfectionism in any way, shape, or form. So I went to the well-known statement in Christ Object Lessons used for last generation theology, did the same process. It's not talking about what it's usually taken to be talking about. So I'm not sure that the thousands of words Ellen White teach on last generation theology is actually is valid. I know she's interpreted that way, but I'm not at all sure that's correct. The other thing that I want to say is that you have a tendency to run together a number of different things which may or may not be the same thing. So gospel Adventism, progressive Adventism, women's ordination, Jan Paulsen. Now, I don't know anything much about Jan Paulsen's theology at all. I know he was a missiologist. He got his doctorate from a liberal German university, but basically dealing with missions. I don't know if he's any more gospel oriented than Neil Wilson or Robert Falkenberg, simply because he was in favor of the ordination of women doesn't necessarily mean he's a gospel Adventist. And please don't misunderstand. I know as close to nothing as I can get to what he actually believed on these things. So he might be, and maybe Stephen will say that he is. I contradict that, but it's not necessary because he was a proponent of women's ordination. So there's a whole lot of things going on together. The other thing that's worth pointing out is that the regional variations in Adventism. It's the reason I asked Ray at the beginning where he grew up geographically. He's a Middle America Adventist, or was, not a California Adventist, not a Southern US Adventist, not an Australian Adventist. They're all different. They're all different. They have different emphases and different ways of expressing things and saying things. I think the General Conference would all like this to be a certain type of...
And there we have it. That's my point.
But
the General Conference would like to have a certain kind of Adventist.
Sure.
The traditional Adventists know who they are, from California to South Africa. They know who they are. My point is not that there's a defined gospel, liberal, Jan Paulsen, Steve Beagles, David Thiel, Gillian Ford Adventist. You guys aren't defined. You are varied and multiple. But when you try and share this varied, multiplied approach, diverse approach, you come up against the GC, as you just said, who would like it to be more unified with uniformity. And the traditional Adventists agree. So yes, I might run you all in together. Yes, but when they meet, they are the highest authority to God, aren't they? As Ellen White claims.
When Ellen White wrote that, there was a few thousand Adventists, and most of them met at the General Conference.
And she herself later on, which she had said that.
Yeah, you can't generalize
that's watering down my point. My point is that yes, you guys can't be pinned down. You have such a diverse view. But when you come against the template, the GC, whether you want to say they're the leaders or not, are holding the frame of Adventism together. And they would rather see you guys out. The traditional Adventist wants David Thiel and Stephen Beagles out. They want Des Ford out. They want the new theology out.
And the devil is working harder from the inside of the church than he does from the outside. And Jesus had the same problem with the temple priests and the scholars and the Pharisees and everybody. The leadership was against Jesus in the nation of Israel. But he came as a carpenter. He hung around with the fishermen, and it seemed like his ministry had failed. He got himself crucified. But there was a purpose behind that. And so the harder the devil pushes on us, the more the light of Christ will shine out. The Spirit of God will take over, and he will finish the work.
Yeah.
It may not be the entire organization, but the church is not the organization, it's the membership, and we need to remember that.
Exactly. It's very Catholic to think of the organization as the church. And that's not my position.
Catholics have, you can actually be, that's not my Catholicism, and have an order that you can join that aligns with it. The Gospel Adventist speaks up, that's not my Adventism. And then the union, the conference, the local grassroots church says, well, what is your Adventism? And the Gospel Adventist goes, oh, hang on, I better be careful what I say, because they know that when they say it, when they say their kind of Adventism, they are banned, shut down, ostracized. I don't know why you guys disagree with me on it. They are, if you're any kind of Adventist you want to be, you are going to be shut down if you publicly start and you're employed. You're going to be absolutely shot down.
Again, why do you limit this to being employed?
Because
the church, that is not a matter of being the church. Being employed.
You don't think there's a problem when it employed people who hold a different belief to the mainstream one know they can't say it publicly or they'll lose their job? That's not a problem?
Oh, look, Peter, I've got to draw on my own experience. And yeah, okay.
There's no way when you were working for the church that you would have said half the things you've said on my show in other interviews. There's no way you would have said them. You would have lost your job in seconds.
Yeah, I wonder about that. If you go back and check the articles I wrote in Spectrum when I was employed, then I wondered what I had to write to get fired sometimes. And that book you've waved around that's banned and gone, the latest word I've heard from that is that a church press in the United States is going to be publishing it.
Yeah, but my point is that anyone can publish it, anyone can speak up, but not if you want to keep your job.
If Acorn and Oak publish this, that's the press of the Pacific Union.
But the whole point of these guys were telling me behind the scenes, we've got a book coming out that's going to be released by the mainstream church.
And there was a problem with that in the initial thing, but as I say, I understand that in unedited form, the same content is being published now by Acorn and Oak.
And I help them every show by publicizing it. People go out and read it and get a hold of it. It's good.
How banned is it if it goes from one church publisher to another?
Well, and that was the best thing they could have done was ban it, because
absolutely
give it more publicity.
It was another one of those
whatever way you slice it, it is a cookie cutter down on the dough, and whether it's inside or outside the church, it is no longer seen as an acceptably promoted church sanctioned piece of information that represents Adventism.
Not officially, but if the members read it,
it's outside the pen.
If it is published by Acorn and Oak, the official publishing house of Pacific Union, you won't be able to say that.
Well, I will look forward to having the various authors come on the show when it is released by Acorn. And I'm impressed how much Acorn does produce. Like a lot of Gil Valentine's work is there.
Yeah.
Now we're going to bring in Ray. He's been very patient, and I appreciate that, Ray. I did say to Ray at the start, I want you to just listen and then come in with some thoughts. We've had some great conversations going on in the chat as always, which is really good to see. A lot of people want to talk more doctrinally about what you guys believe, and can you connect it with the Bible and make it work. We can possibly come to that if we have time. Ray, share with us some thought, and thanks Stephen and David there. Some really good thoughts you brought up there. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'll start responding to something that you said, David. You mentioned that I'm from the Midwest, and your point in asking that question is that there are regional differences. That's absolutely true. There are regional differences. The Michigan Conference and the Minnesota Conference and the Kansas-Nebraska Conference and the Idaho Conference and all the other conferences that I've been in my life are different in many, many ways. And I also would agree in part that I don't see sort of gospel Adventism as a one-to-one same thing as progressivism. Like progressive Adventism, if I go read, I've not read many of your articles, but if I go read something that's in Spectrum or Adventist Today, it's really just American progressivism in an Adventist form. It's not a new or even uniquely Adventist thing. When I go read Fulcrum 7 or something of that nature, that's dyed-in-the-wool, last-generation theology. Now, where I grew up in Michigan and the somewhat conservative church my family was part of when I was very young in Minnesota, last-generation theology was around. There were people that definitely believed that. But like my family didn't specifically believe last generation theology, and we were very conservative in many ways. More conservative than some, less conservative than others, but conservative leaning Adventists nonetheless. So I do agree that there's a lot of nuance there in who believes what, and these groups are not necessarily monolithic groups. At the same time, it does seem from watching how institutions, let's say, Adventist institutions react to certain things is it may not necessarily be about things that seem core doctrinal issues. Sometimes they are. I think it's really about institutional cohesion. For example, if you look at somebody like a Conrad Vine, who I've never met, don't follow him to any significant degree, but when you look at what happened with the Michigan Conference and Conrad Vine and Pastor Ron Kelly, you have two very conservative individuals who are teaching, if not last generation theology, something approximating it, very conservative. And the Michigan Conference absolutely canned both of them harshly, quickly, because essentially Dr. Vine, in their minds, threatened their income because he suggested that maybe someday, possibly, we might want to not send our tithes to a conference that's out of line with our beliefs as Seventh-day Adventists. And I say that as a former, not as a current Adventist. And then when I see historically something like Dr. Ford being defrocked in a very secretive, I'll say it, kangaroo court, put on by the General Conference, it was about institutional cohesion because he was disagreeing with something core to Seventh-day Adventism. To use the ordination example, I actually do think as somebody who was in the conservative side of that debate, the conservative frustration with someone like a Ted Wilson was that he wasn't doing anything about conferences and unions that just thumbed their nose at the 2015 vote. And a lot of what Ted Wilson did was just basically lip service to keep the conservatives from turning their ire on him or his administration. So like the what was that committee called they formed at the general conference level?
The ordination of
like the compliance committee. It was some like
oh
really,
yes,
Compliance document.
yeah, that's
compliance
it.
committee. Yes,
It even my conservative at the time, conservative Adventist self was going, do we really want to do this?
Yeah.
So I really do think it's about institutional cohesion. I mean, that's why you see, that's why you see very, I'll say contemporary churches like Crosswalk Church. There's several of them. They make a lot of money, and they remit a lot of that money in a non-typical tithing system to the conference. I don't know if it's North American Division directly, but it's to the institutional church.
okay.
And Crosswalk is not teaching the 28 fundamental beliefs from what people who are familiar with it tell me. They're teaching more like mainline evangelical American Christians. They happen to meet on Saturday. But the Adventist system is tolerating that right now because it's making them money. Conrad Vine, who's a proponent of historic Adventism, was ostracized because he slightly, maybe kind of potentially threatened the money stream.
Right.
So I don't, when I was a student in college, actually, I saw professors actively organizing around pro same-sex marriage and similar issues. And I know this might not be popular to say with this audience, but that stuff just isn't biblical, and it's plainly not biblical. And to see that get just eventually quietly asked not to be open, not shut down, not silenced, but no professor was fired for openly supporting something the Bible forbids. No professor or administrator at my school or student was called before an academic committee of some kind for teaching against what the church teaches about human sexuality. But for whatever reason, that was let go, even though it seems to be the core or a core Christian doctrine, not just Adventist. But that wasn't affecting the institutional cohesion. What does affect institutional cohesion are some of these core things, or in the case of a Conrad Vine, the money. So I do think there's some nuance there. Just in summary, when switching gears, I hear you both saying a lot about affirming the 28 fundamental beliefs, and okay. But what I don't understand is that although I don't think the 28 fundamentals, like if you just go to the Adventist.org and read through those paragraphs, you're not going to come away with last generation theology from those. Not today. But you are going to come away with a more conservative view of Adventism. And I guess on the one hand, when you say you affirm all these things, you're supportive of reading Ellen White and teaching all the core Adventist doctrines. I'm not hearing a distinction of gospel Adventism as distinct from just Adventism. But on the other hand, you both in different ways suggested you want to push back on things like last generation theology. Okay, good. Last generation theology is bad. But even in the more conservative circles where they're uncomfortable, let's say, with the sinless perfectionism, they're still, I didn't think I was a legalist. I didn't. But I still thought that I had to check certain boxes. I still thought I had to get the seal of God ultimately by keeping the Sabbath. In my mind, that wasn't legalism, but definitionally, it is legalism. Like, Stephen, you mentioned early on righteousness by faith. I think, at least initially, you correctly articulated what the Apostle Paul says about the righteousness that comes by faith being this declarative judgment statement that we are made righteous in the sight of God, and that sanctification is the fruit, not the root of that. But then you say survives the judgment. Now, this is my legal training coming in here, but to say that I've been adjudicated as innocent, as righteous, and then to say that I survive a judgment that determines whether I'm in heaven or not is a contradiction in terms. Like, I don't come into judgment in the first instance. It's already been adjudicated in my case because I believe on Jesus. So there's no judgment to come later for me. At least, and again, in terms of salvation, I understand there's the Bema Seat judgment. That's a different thing. But on the one hand, I hear things that are the same form of general Adventist ideas that I grew up with. And then on the other hand, I hear you saying that you want to push back against some of those things. And I don't really know how to reconcile, or maybe a better way to say it is, how do you reconcile? I pulled the 28 fundamental beliefs with let's preach the gospel, because I cannot think of a more anti-gospel belief than the investigative judgment. I just can't. The idea that Jesus had to complete his atonement after Calvary is not biblical.
No,
I don't know how to reconcile those.
It's an application of the benefits that come out of the atonement. See,
but doesn't that get applied when I, by faith, accept what Christ has accomplished?
We have assurance of salvation here and now as long as we maintain faith. And our job is to hold on to Christ. And we are being saved, because it's a everyday commitment. We have to maintain our relationship with Jesus. And at the end, God's going to shut the door on the wicked, and he's going to accept us into his kingdom. So there's a separation there. But right before that, we already have the verdict of the final judgment. That's my message. So it's good news, because we already have the verdict as long as we hold on to Jesus.
How do you hold on to Jesus?
By just simply believing and trusting that he's your Lord and Savior, and that you have assurance in him right here and now.
Okay, but then why do I need an investigative judgment later? If it has to be applied to me, and it wasn't applied when I, by faith, accepted what Jesus has done, why do I need something to come later?
Well, that's what Jesus said. He said, every word that man will speak, you have to account for in the judgment. And so Jesus made it very clear there's a future judgment to be held right before the second coming. It's the separating of the sheep from the goats, the believers from the make-believers, the wheat from the chaff. And that's something he set up for the universe to watch, is so that everybody knows that God's being just.
But God is just by nature. He doesn't have to prove that to anybody. Not to human beings, not to angels, not to unfallen worlds.
A third of the angels fell from heaven because they declared God to be unjust.
Where does the Bible say that?
It says it from Genesis all the way to Revelation. Okay.
No, it doesn't.
And I'm not going to get into that here. Yes, it does. There's judgment all the way through the Bible, and God has to keep reinforcing that he is a God of holiness. He's a God of love. He's a God of holiness. He's a God of love. And so every time you see the devil poke his head up in the Garden of Eden, he said, God's not being fair. He's withholding immortality from you. And Job, God's not being fair because, you're only protecting Job because he trusts and he's being obedient to you. And it just keeps going on and on and on. Okay. So in a third of the angels fell from heaven because they declared God to be unjust. And so now he has to show the universe that he is a God of justice.
I know there's a verse in Revelation where it talks about the dragon sweeping a third of the stars out of heaven, and I'm given to understand that a number of Christians interpret that as a third of the angels. But where does it say they did that because they felt God was unfair?
Why would they leave heaven?
I don't know that we're told.
See, so that's the point. The point is there was a separation. There was war in heaven. Do you think they were warring against a God they believe was holy, just, and fair? Or do you believe that they just left heaven because they felt like it? I mean, there was a conflict there. And so the whole of Scripture shows the character of God. And it shows how God's both holy and loving at the same time. And that was at the cross. You see God's justice and you see his mercy come together at the cross. And that's the revelation of his love and his character. Here in his love, not that we loved God, but he loved us and sent his son as an atoning sacrifice for our sin. Why couldn't God just say, well, I'm giving Adam and Eve a second chance without having to go send Jesus to the cross? Because he had to maintain his justice.
Well, I certainly agree that the cross demonstrates the perfect judgment, righteousness, holiness of God, his wrath against sin, in that Christ, he who knew no sin, became sin for us so that we might become the righteousness of God in him. I affirm that wholeheartedly. But where I see the contradiction is that this all-sufficient, once-for-all sacrifice of himself at Calvary somehow needs a second phase later, and that's what the 28 fundamental beliefs affirm, is that there's this extra work to come later, and that's not what the scriptures say. That's not what Hebrews says.
Well, Paul says it's up to us to die and then face judgment. So when we die,
for how we've lived as Christians,
right? So there's a review of our life before we get into heaven.
But that's about reward. All our sin has been taken care of at Calvary.
Right, that's the point. Is we don't have to worry about the judgment. It's already for the Christian. It's just a way for God to declare you, okay, that you're sealed and you're in heaven. He separates you from the goats, and then also he brings his rewards with him. So he's determining your rewards at the same time.
Can I cut into this this point?
I'd like you to cut in because you looked like you were agreeing with Ray.
Well, Stephen, I'm sure, is feeling unsupported by me, but I'm not sure that we necessarily agree on everything in this particular space. Ray, I really appreciated your comments. I think when you talk about institutional cohesion, institutional integrity, you're exactly on ball, and I think that's exactly right. When it comes, let me ask you again. I like to know who I'm talking to.
Sure.
You're obviously have continued as a Christian. Can I ask what kind of Christian you are? Are you Reformed or Lutheran? Where did you go when you left Adventism?
I wouldn't say I fit neatly into Reformed theology because I believe in free will. I'm still sort of working out the details, I would say, of my own beliefs. I find, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Leighton Flowers. I find his arguments on his channel, Soteriology 101, pretty compelling. Basically, he calls it provisionism. I'm not sure how it differs exactly from Arminianism yet because I'm not a theologian.
Yep.
But basically a defense of God-given human free will.
Okay. On the issue of the judgment, what I said in my own position is I believe in the 28 fundamentals at their theological core. So what is the judgment fundamental saying at its theological core? It's not saying two apartments in the heavenly sanctuary at its theological core. It's not saying 1844 at its theological core. It's not even saying 2 phases of ministry in its theological core, as far as I can see. Rather, I would say that the theological core of the doctrine of the judgment is twofold. One is that, let me lay a foundation before I go to my 2 points. The foundation is the gospel, that we are saved 100%, totally, utterly, fully, completely by the merits of Christ, appropriated through faith. So that is where I stand. What then is the judgment? What are the theological core message of the judgment? It seems to me the judgment entails a couple of things. Crucially, the fact that the believing Christian can change his mind and be lost again. That it's not a matter of once saved, always saved. Clearly, if you believe once saved, always saved, there is no room for an investigative judgment of any sort. Equally, if you believe in a deep predestination, there's no room for review. There's no point. And a number of other things would preclude it. But enough said there. We can return to our lostness. The second thing that it seems to me that the judgment is teaching is that God expects his children on earth to live morally responsible lives. Now, not perfect lives, but not casual indifference to sin and holiness. My preferred analogy on all of these things is marriage. I used to ask my students if they were perfectly married. And there's only one possible answer to that. If you're married, you're perfectly married. If the paper's signed, it's an on-off switch. It's not graduated. You're either married or not married. Are you a perfect husband? Perfect spouse? Different question, different range of answers, all of which start with no. Are not perfect spouses. But we're not divorced every time we have a fight with our wife either. But if we take an attitude of careless indifference to our marriage and our spouse, I would predict that in due course of time we will be divorced. You know, marriage is a matter of walking together. So the judgment is more about the genuineness, the evidence of the genuineness of the faith that connects us to the Saviour. And to ask where in the Bible is there any talk of that, I could point you to several places, not least James, who says, we're not justified by faith alone, and then quotes exactly the same text that Paul quotes to make the opposite point. But Paul and James are talking about two different things when they talk about justification. Or we could go to the parable of the unforgiving servant, Matthew 18, where the king forgives him his debt, but by the end of the parable, he's in prison until he pays off every cent he owes. That forgiveness is revoked because the person is not in relationship. So look, let me leave it there. There's no doubt more I could say, and I can almost predict some of your response to it. But I'll leave it there.
I'm going to hand it over.
I mean, I'll just respond briefly.
Ray, I'll just get you to respond in 1 second. Just before, there's so much chat going, I just want to bring one comment up before it tips over the edge and goes into the abyss. And then, Ray, you'll have the floor. Dave, down under drift, okay? An Aussie writes, David, how does what you are saying differ from any sensible Protestant position? It's not distinctively an Adventist position.
Most Protestants are Calvinists, so it's different from most Protestants for a start. Many Protestants are liberal. Your mainline churches are liberal, who wouldn't believe in a judgment in any case. I mean, other areas where the metaphor of the judgment is important. One of the reasons that the judgment would not be applicable, we mentioned the Calvinist issues before, but if the law of God is abolished, no longer is a standard, then of course there's nothing to judge by, and Ray, being a lawyer, will know exactly the point that I'm making here. You can't be condemned for something there's no law against. And now that I'm talking about the law, I'm starting to talk on more distinctively Adventist positions. If the thing that makes us an Adventist is that we believe something happened in heaven in 1844, I'm not sure it's worthwhile.
But that's what the investigative judgment is. You can't say, I affirm the investigative judgment, say 1844 doesn't matter, 2 literal apartments in the heavenly sanctuary doesn't matter. That's not the core. That is the core. That's what it is.
It's not the theological core. It's not what the not what the believers were trying to affirm theologically at the time.
Okay, well, if what they're trying to affirm theologically is, Christ is reviewing the record to show, let's say, the unfallen worlds, and I don't want to mischaracterize you, but to show unfallen beings the record, so here's the evidence that Ray is truly saved, or not, as the case may be, then that completely strips it of what it was intended originally to be, which is that he's investigating you to see if you're fit for heaven. And if it's...
To the extent we said that, we were wrong.
Okay.
Why, if your theology is a work in progress, well, the churches can be too.
Who said it's wrong?
Well, if I've been declared righteous because I've put my faith and trust in Jesus Christ, Christ showing the unfallen worlds the evidence that I'm truly a believer undermines his word that I am his.
Oh.
That is a complete contradiction.
Well, I wouldn't see it like that. I mean, ultimately, that's what it will come down to, isn't it? When we pick up the pieces and weigh them, we wind up with a different a different balance between us. I know some people will say that the judgment completely undermines any sense of assurance.
Des Ford said that, yeah.
Yeah, it's not necessarily true. If I were put on trial, and the issue was whether or not I loved my wife, I would have no fear of the outcome, because I know I love my wife. I know there is evidence I love my wife. I can call witnesses that I love my wife. And most of all, most important of all, I can call my wife and she will give her testimony. Same thing applies at the cosmic level. Is my faith genuine? Well, yes. Is there any evidence that it's genuine? Yes. Are there people who can testify to the apparent genuineness of my faith? Yes. But most importantly of all, I can call Jesus, and he will testify to the evidence, the genuineness of my faith. I'm not talking about perfect faith or perfect performance.
No, we're not talking about sinless perfection here. I'm totally following that.
It all sounds very normal Protestantism, David.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree as an evangelical Protestant that Christians are called to live lives of holiness, to live according to God's standards to the best of our ability. I fully affirm that. But whatever that might evidence about me, it's not what makes me saved, because what saves me is the merit of Christ, who perfectly obeyed God's standards.
Absolutely.
Because he is God incarnate.
Absolutely.
And if God has said of me that I am righteous because I'm hidden in Christ, and he sees the perfect righteousness of his Son, to then say, I'm going to prove it now by investigative judgment means, let's say, he's undermined his own declaration that I'm his.
I'm not sure that's true, but to affirm
well, because he's not a human judge.
To affirm something is not necessarily undermined, or the affirmation of something is not necessarily undermined by the demonstration of that.
But if I believe God is who he says he is, and if I'm an unfallen being, I certainly believe God is who he says he is, I take God at his word. He doesn't have to prove anything to me.
Yes. The problem with this, and I fundamentally agree with you, but the problem with it is, as Stephen pointed out, obviously there have been occasions when the unfallen beings didn't take God at his word. Peter, can I just comment on what you've put up on the screen there? Thief on the cross had zero evidence of his faith. The Gospels tell us that both thieves were cursing Christ. Presumably, the one who believes stops cursing. That is evidence of faith. His life of sanctification is not lengthy, but it does exist.
David, on that next one, why, and Stephen, you might like to add something here too. Why call people out of apostate Protestantism then?
Stephen, do you want to have a go at this one?
Yeah, well, there's a difference between mainline Protestant and apostate Protestant. And I could name a few apostate Protestant, or, I mean, I wouldn't even call them Protestant anymore. Some of the stuff that you see out there today, Word of Faith movement, is not really Christian as far as I'm concerned. They've lost the plot when it comes to health and wealth teachings. There's a lot of charismatic stuff going on that I would not, consider the mainline Christianity. So there seems to be a shift within the evangelical world towards more of the prosperity teachings and the Benny Hinn's and the Joel Osteens and the Joyce Myers, and you even before them was Robertsons, and they're all this, on the Trinity Broadcast Network. You see a whole slew of them, and to me, that's not a true expression of Christianity. It's a false gospel. There's false teachings, and the more we see of that in Christianity, I mean, they have huge mega churches, and it seems to be that they're growing faster than the average mainline, say the Baptist or Lutheran or Methodist. They seem to be trying to hold people together, but it seems like these mega churches keep growing, and I don't know. I think that's a very dangerous thing for evangelicalism to even accept them. Like some of the false teachings that they're putting out there. So there's traditional evangelic, like the mainline Lutheranism, Baptist, Methodist, Congregationalist, Nazarene. They're all considered Orthodox. But some of these other ones, I would not. I think they're an apostasy. So, do I believe that if you're not a Seventh-day Adventist, that you're not a real Christian? Absolutely, you are a Christian. If you believe that Jesus was divine, you believe in the full atonement at the cross, you believe in righteousness by faith, you believe that the Bible is the Word of God, you are Orthodox Christian, and you're just as saved as everybody else. But we have a message for the future, and we're just warning people against apostasy. And we're just telling them that if you really want to understand the Bible, this is what we see for the future. And we're warning the world so that when this does happen, they will be able to avoid deceptions.
But the thing that makes my church apostate Protestantism isn't that we've bought into word of faith or prosperity gospel or some of those other modern day, I'll say it, heresies. And I fully agree with you that those are problems that evangelicalism has to face. But the thing in the Adventist teaching, going back to Ellen White and not exclusively her, the thing that makes us apostate Protestants is that we go to church on Sunday. It's not even that we're Sunday Sabbatarians. At least me personally, I'm not a Sabbatarian. I'm a non-Sabbatarian. I don't observe a weekly Sabbath day. I do take time to rest, to spend time with God. I need to do that more. But the thing that in Ellen White's, what I was taught growing up, not just Ellen White, but what I was taught growing up, that made churches like mine apostate, quote unquote, is that we gather on Sunday, that we keep Sunday. We're the Sunday keepers, Sunday churches. It's not about those other modern day heresies to Adventism.
That's a misinterpretation of what the church actually teaches. There are people in the church.
Stephen, I was taught that my whole life.
Yeah, I know, and you were taught wrong, because it's not true Adventism. What we're saying is, in the future, there will be an antichrist movement that will be anti-gospel, and they will force a day of worship on the rest of the world. And to go along with that system, it's a forced system of worship. And if you comply with that, then you become apostate, because they're teaching a false gospel. And the Sabbath reminds us of the true gospel, which is resting in Christ apart from works. And if we allow ourselves to be deceived into complying with the Antichrist system of forced worship, where you won't be able to buy or sell unless you comply, that's anti-gospel. That's apostasy.
Am I complying by doing exactly what I'm doing now, by going to church on Sunday?
No. You are a Christian. You're saved by the blood of Christ. We're justified by faith apart from the works of the law. So Jesus has already fulfilled the conditions for your salvation. Now, we rest in Christ as a reminder of what the gospel teaches. And we also do it out of love and gratitude for the 10 Commandments. We want to live a holy life, the way we see it. But we don't see you as being unchristian.
Ray, what's your thought on that?
I take you at your word that you don't see it that way. Every Bible teacher I had, K-12, multiple different schools, pastors, evangelists doing revelation seminars, college professors, I could go on, all said what I just described.
Well, they're wrong.
That's not an outlier teaching.
It is an outlier teaching. It's not what we truly teach as a denomination. And those professors or teachers, they taught you what they were taught by the last generation side of the church, more than likely. But that's not how the denomination views other Christians.
Some of them were last generation. Most of them were not.
Yeah.
Some of them,
they were in different places, different states, different conferences.
All
some
I'm
very
saying
conservative,
is
some very liberal.
Teaching states that the Antichrist is coming in a future time, the Sunday law, which is a forced system of worship, which is anti-gospel, is coming in.
I think the two of you are talking at cross purposes.
Possible,
so
yes.
You're talking about the mark of the beast and the Antichrist in the future. The question is not really the status of individual Christians at the moment, but the status of other churches at the moment. And I suspect that Ray's recollection is probably pretty good. We have said some fairly nasty things about other churches. And we shouldn't have.
Even recently, one of the reasons Rain de Bruinsma had his talk a year or two ago moved from Adventist soil in Loma Linda was because GC, who obviously we don't have to bow to at all, has no influence. They canned it.
Well, they stopped it being held at Loma Linda, but they didn't stop it happening.
No, because we've got places like Acorn that will support this kind of.
So
it's only when you speak up publicly in a church sort of situation that you'll find these problems.
Perhaps we shouldn't have come here, Peter.
You're not on Adventist soil. You're not on Adventist soil. You can speak freely, David.
I don't know about you, Peter, but I'm on Adventist soil.
I don't want to minimize Ray's experience because I know where that's coming from. And I know that he heard what he heard and he believed what he believed. But I'm trying to reassure him is that's not mainstream Adventism. I mean, and this is what I wish the church would make clear, is that we cannot allow all these diverse teachings that are confusing the average person. And this is one of the reasons why I had to block everybody out and go to the Bible for my answers. And once I heard the answer from the Bible, then God confirmed what he taught me in Scripture by other people within the church. But I always found it in the Scripture first, and then he confirmed it after that. And there are some godly Seventh-day Adventist people, George Knight, Judd Lake, Michael Campbell, and people in my own family. I know people on the inside, and I even like Clifford Goldstein, even though he's rough around some edges. I actually worked for Desmond Ford for a few months because I admired his presentation of the gospel. And we could agree to disagree on the 2300 days, and we didn't bring that up. But he was happy with the fact that I loved his presentation of the gospel. He was a gospel minister. He didn't want to get caught up in 2300 days, but he did anyway. But what we need to do as an organization is make clear what we believe and then stick to it. We can't be wishy-washy. We can't be flip-flopping. And this is where we're having so many problems. And I love you, Peter, because you're pointing out the problems. And God's telling me, if you see the problem, be a solution. Try to fix it from within.
Yeah, I'm actually all about resolution and stimulating conversation that hopefully you guys can get more organized and find some solution. I
It's
just
going
don't
to
think
take
it's ever going to happen, sadly. I think,
some boldness, and
I think
and there will be some sacrifice, and there will be some pushback. But we're men, we have to expect that whenever we preach the gospel, there will be controversy, there will be opposition.
Yeah.
But we're strong enough to meet this challenge.
well, some of you are.
Peter, time is ticking by. I'm not sure how much longer I can stay this afternoon.
We're about to wrap up, so
okay, I can stay that long.
Good timing. This is like a conversation starter. Like I'm on the other side of the hill where I was just kind of throwing up my arms at you guys, having felt that I'd offered some kind of, positive way to bring you all together, to now just going, well, let's bring in people like Ray. Let's talk about your theology. Let's look at gospel Adventism, progressive Adventism. You and Stephen would be disagreeing on some things. Stephen and Des, you and Des, you're not all disciples to this, but there is a theme, there's a thread running between progressive liberal gospel Adventists that is, while quite varied, it does have some similarities. And I think people like Ray are pointing out that when you even look at gospel Adventism as a possible movement or theology or some sort of broad big tent doctrinal statement, that possibly that is even a little bit unbiblical. And so I'm really looking forward to future conversations where instead of me pushing back on what I see as a political lost opportunity, I'm going to be involving people like Stephen and you, David, and Ray to get into what we've just started talking about, which I really have found very interesting. Some of the theological stuff, and I'm really looking forward to that.
And this is why I'm an Adventist and not a Baptist or a Lutheran or anything else. I'm convinced of my teachings. I know other people disagree. Just because they disagree doesn't mean that I'm wrong. But I do have a lot to learn from other people. So, that's why conversating and communicating is a good thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, Stephen, how can people get in touch with you, and what's your main kind of focus and platform now? Let us know. Tell us right now so we can give it a bit of a plug.
Well, I have a YouTube channel. It's Gospel Adventist. It's called Gospel Adventist. And I also have a Facebook page, which I'm quite active on. So if you're a friend of mine, you can DM me or you can leave a comment. I'll get back to you. And I have an email. If you want to email me, you're more than welcome. I'll respond to those as well. And, you want my email?
Yeah, just share your email. I can't bring it onto the screen, but I can. We'll have good memories.
Try Stephen STEPHEN .Beagles BEAGLES @yahoo.com.
Awesome, David. Any written works, websites, blogs? I highly encourage anyone that lives in an area where we are, if you get a chance to see Dr. David Thiel speaking, preaching live, go and see him, because always full of intelligence, humor, provocative. You've said things that I've gone, what? And then I've thought, but I've looked at the audience and it's just gone over their heads. So you've got a way of phrasing things that I find very intriguing. So if failing that, how else can people get in touch with you if they can't see you live?
There's various bits and pieces of presentations on YouTube. I am not great with social media. Old enough to have walked with the dinosaurs. And, it doesn't come naturally. I do have a Facebook page. That's probably the easiest way.
That way, yeah. You're often writing about books that you and Gillian have been reading, not Gillian Ford, Gillian Thiel.
Mm-hmm.
I keep thinking, how many books can you possibly read? You're going through like 5 a month.
Well, we've still got several thousand to go, and that's just the ones that are here. So,
Well,
it's not that I have too many books, Peter. It's just I'm planning to live to 160, and I've bought the books to read in that time frame.
Just to keep going. Yeah, I like it. Well, I do really appreciate David and Stephen. Thank you for joining us today. And Ray, we're going to give you just the last word to just tie things up that we've talked about. Our initial premise and theory that I put forward was that gospel Adventism, progressive Adventism, liberal Adventism, any Adventism that is offering hope and change for the future is a honey trap, because people come into the church, young people grow up and go, oh, awesome, it's about haystacks and hugging trees and loving each other and Jesus first and all that other stuff. It actually, oh, wow, it isn't even real. And then they kind of... when they stray from the drop of honey on the table, they find other things that present as more legalistic. So is my thesis, broadly speaking, accurate, do you think, in your mind? Stephen and David have disagreed.
Yes, with some of the nuances that we had talked about before.
Yeah.
But just for me to wrap it up, I really appreciate the conversation, Dr. Thiel. I'm sorry.
Thiel, I say. Thiel.
Okay.
But I answer to anything.
Hey, you.
Yes.
I really appreciate the conversation, and you too, Stephen. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And Ray, you did point out a really good thing where the church steps in, not necessarily in any way pushing, a marketing approach, or they would get behind Conrad because he's got real source material alignment with Ellen White and original. So how did you phrase it? You used a term that I thought was really good, cohesive.
Institutional cohesion.
Institutional cohesion. I think that is really something that the Adventist leadership is very interested in. And they see gospel Adventism, Conrad Vine, tithing Adventism, they see that as potentially not being cohesive for the Adventist church. They saw Des Ford theology as not being cohesive. And I think the sad thing is that the David Thiel theology, the Stephen Beagles theology, church leadership does not see it as being a cohesive institutional force. Well, I think, David, did you want to say something there?
I'm already friends with Stephen on Facebook, and we're communicating. But Ray, I have appreciated the dialogue today and would love to continue it. Would you object if I asked Peter to share your email address with me?
No, not at all.
Happy to do that. Yeah.
Expect an email from me somewhere in the future.
Awesome. That's what we're doing. We're connecting. Yeah. We're networking. Yes. And Stephen Beagles, keep up the good work with all your gospel Adventism platforms. I admire that you're making a stand and you're saying, here's what we believe, come join me. And,
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, until next time, tomorrow, by the way, everybody, Tom Norris is back on the show. Now, Tom always causes lots of controversy in things that he says, so join us then. Next week, we've got Kirsty Williams back, and we've got Carl Wagner. Ray, I'm thinking of inviting you, if possible, to join me with Carl next week, because we're going to start now drilling into what is it that gospel Adventists believe, and is it biblical? So have a check of your calendar for that. Look forward to having you both back as well, David and Stephen. And David, let's catch up at Chilled very soon.
I'll look forward to it, Peter.
See you, everybody. Thanks for your support.
Bye-bye.